Good evening, everybody. My name is Michael Goss. I'm Vice Chair of the Civil Division here in Engineers Ireland. You're very welcome to this presentation, which has been co-hosted between the Civil Division and the Roads and Transport Society. The presentation will last just less than 1 hour, and then we'll have an opportunity to you'll have an opportunity then to ask questions afterwards. We'll send around a microphone, so if you want to put your hand up, and so the people online can also hear you. We've got 3 presenters here this evening. We've got John McCarthy, Chartered Engineer, Senior Advisor in the Department of Transport, and he's also Chairman of the Civil Division. Stephen Flynn, Chartered Engineer with the Road Management Office, and Paul Fox, Executive Engineer with the Local Government Management Agency. The presentation is about an overview of the development of a pavement management and road licensing system using roadmap software systems developed by the LGMA. So without further ado, I'll pass you over to John McCarthy, who will lead the presentation. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you very much for this evening. I just will start with an overview and a background in terms of road management for local authorities in Ireland. And I suppose the reason why we are where we are today, just to give a bit of context, and it'll lead on then to the other 2 speakers, Stephen, who will go on into more detail about the Road Management Office, what it is and where it's going to be going, and I suppose from Paul Fox of the LGMA in terms of the use of softwares and technologies and where we're going with that. So in terms of background and funding, just to give a context in terms of road funding, in 2013, Ireland funded its road network to the percentage of about 0.35 of GDP, which is way lower than the industrialised nation average. Now, as you can see in terms of grants and allocations and things like that, the funding is actually quite low at this stage in terms of its overall needs. It's about the total monies in 2013 spent on roads was 870 million. For 2014 and 2015, they're probably of a similar enough order. So they've stabilised at this stage. They're not really going down in a huge way, but nonetheless, they're way below what they should be. Again, just a kind of comparator with other industrialised nations, you can see where with some countries, are up to 1.49, 1.5%, and even 2.45% in some countries. So we're actually quite low, and that's particularly interesting in the context that we have a lot of road. We have an awful lot of road. We've about 2.5 times the EU average, and which in terms of funding makes it quite a challenge in terms of maintaining and supporting that network. You can see that cumulatively from 1994 to 2013. And you can see these are percentages of GDP, and you can see how during the mid-90s the funding was at a certain level, and then it rose quite well then during the noughties, and then plummeted again since 2008, and we're down at a kind of quite a low level, even compared to where we were in the mid-90s. But still, all in all, over that period of time, there was nearly 20 billion euros of money spent on roads. Again, if you look at the funding in real terms and then in terms where it's adjusted for inflation, you can see in real terms, or not in real terms, but in actual money terms, they're increasing quite well through the noughties and then decrease quite rapidly. But then when you see them adjusted for inflation, the picture is actually not quite as good. So it's just worth bearing in mind where we are in terms of funding for roads and being able to maintain the road. Having said that, during the noughties, the condition of the road network as a whole did improve. There's no doubt about that. And I suppose even since the diminishing, in terms of the drop in funding, the condition has, I suppose, maintained a reasonable level, but it's certainly starting to show problems. So in terms of maintenance needs, there's 99,000 kilometres of road. For national roads, there's 5,500 kilometres, and then for regional local roads, 93,500. Local authorities are responsible for that road network, particularly for the maintenance of regional local roads, and then for national roads, they're supported, and I suppose there's a heavy involvement from the National Roads Authority as well. In terms of maintenance needs, for surface dressing, if you're looking at that in the network, it's about 4,700 kilometres a year, 5% of the network. And then, for strengthening, it's about the same. And we're achieving just over half or significantly less than half of what we need to be achieving. And then when you look at the steady state figures, what we're trying to achieve, a good rough calculation, gives us about just short of 600 million. But even in that figure, there probably isn't sufficient provision for things like bridges, safety, other areas like that. So that's a very, very basic figure, I would say. Challenges, inadequate record keeping, being able to demonstrate funding needs, being able to demonstrate value for money, need improved business processes and systems, and inadequate road funding. So the needs are currently based on the mileage of the network, and the practice has been moving towards a more tailored, locally based needs plan supported by pavement management. So that's what we need to be achieving. And so the main focus will be on maintenance and rehabilitation, drainage and bridges. And obviously the balance between state and local authority owned resources is critical, and we need to take regard for a performance-based approach, looking at trends, tracking trends, and using KPIs as well. So for roads and pavement management, in 2005 there was a national needs study for roads, and it was to establish county by county and nationally the lengths of areas of various categories for non-national roads requiring remedial works, and to review existing pavement management systems and recommend a system suitable for use on the non-national road network, and recommended the use of MapRoad, which was a pre-existing system in the LGMA. And that report is on the Department of Transport website. But coupled with that, I suppose, it's worth just bearing in mind the challenges which are coming at the network, such as the funding challenge which I was just talking about. Also, things like timber transport, where it's expected the transport of timber in rural areas is expected to double over the next few years after we putting a significantly extra load in the network, as well as the ending of the milk levy and the impact that would have in terms of transport as well on the local network. Again, other challenges which we have relate to bridges, maintenance management and hazards, public lighting, safety, public liability. So in terms of pavement management, it's about trying to maintain and improve the condition of the road network in an effective and efficient manner. Trying to measure actual performance, improve the business case for investment of the road network, improve the safety of the road network to the public, reduce litigation costs, financial benefit, improve the understanding of the benefits to be gained from the various treatment types. So gaining more knowledge as to the effectiveness as to the treatments on the network, and obviously trying to store data being gathered in a more effective manner and being able to use it in a more effective manner. And obviously what we need to know is a full inventory and a known value of the road network as well. So for roadworks and licensing, the background here relates to the government broadband strategy, the government job strategy, and I suppose the creation of Irish Water. These are all big challenges. So in terms of licensing, most local authorities, particularly rural, have a manual system in place, which I suppose, given the volume of applications, is reasonable enough approach. But many of the urbans have had systems in place, IT systems in place. You can see what they are there. But what we need to do is take them all together and bring them in a kind of a single national system, which we're calling MapRoad Roadworks and Licensing. So the benefits of the licensing of road openings, again, is trying to give efficiency gains for all stakeholders, establish and maintain maintenance of road history for all the roads under an authority's control, coordination of roadworks with other utilities or with pavements, standardised approach nationally, trying to give surety to the utilities, provision of appropriate IT solutions to all stakeholders, and then trying to give benefits in terms of safety of road users immediately before, during and after the works. being able to manage the traffic before, during and after the works, and support the management of legal claims. So the challenges are, I suppose one of the biggest challenges in any endeavour like this is trying to look at what are the factors which affect success. And they can be defined into processes, people, technology and funding. And you can kind of see that graph there, and really it's a kind of a mixture of all that, and trying to get the correct balance in terms of all that, and your solution is, I suppose, within that space. But ultimately, the best technology in the world will fail if implemented in an environment where there is no people to run it, where there are no business processes in place to utilise it. So it's important to say that it has to be absolutely embedded into an organisation. It can't be just a kind of a nice tool over to the side, but it has to actually be part of the day-to-day running and operation of an organisation. So executives and managers need to be demonstratively committed to the system. It needs to ensure that their priorities are explicit and in terms of the goals and objectives of the organisation regarding to road asset management. We need, I suppose, given the nature of what's being proposed, a separate organisational unit to try and drive it, and then trying to look at all the processes, including subsidiary process, to make sure it's part of the day-to-day work of an organisation. And I suppose the solutions need to be fit for purpose. They don't need to be the ultimate solutions, they just need to be fit for purpose. Business processes, again, just to repeat the message, they need to be active. It must play an active role in the agency's business. You know, in terms of the people, it must be fully institutionalised and supported, and again, the dedicated organisational unit. So, in terms of technology, it must be appropriate, as I said. IT is becoming increasingly complex. So you need a strong IT division and an IT strategy to get those benefits. And it should be properly supported and maintained and developed. And obviously that proper support structure, such as an IT policy, is needed. And that ensures a consistent strategy and direction for the agencies with its IT procurement and implementation. Again, the challenge, I suppose, could be described as being very, very large, and the best way of doing it is trying to break it down into individual tasks and go one step at a time, each step being a challenge and a win and a gain and a benefit in its own right. And again, I suppose, looking at our scale of tasks, there are the list of tasks which we would have, and that kind of gives a sense as to the challenge which we're facing and which we have been facing. And I suppose I can assure you that some of those challenges have been delivered upon, some are still in progress. But the high-level objectives which we're looking at here at the moment are more specifically in relation to pavement management, roadworks licensing, speed limits. And obviously, a long list of individual tasks need to prioritise, and each task has its own benefits. And I would say persistence is a big thing to have here. So the RMO, I suppose the challenges about resources, and particularly in the current environment where they're quite limited, and we can see kind of type of resources which are kind of, I suppose you could say, are being applied at the moment, or which are being applied up to the establishment of the RMO. And in many ways they're being quite limited, especially given the fact we've the large number of local authorities and the large extent of the road network. So I suppose the only essence I can say about that is that the collaborative approach and the support infrastructure is very important. And I suppose the work of the LGCSB and the LGMA has benefited from closer working with the local authorities and DTAS. Project Office, which we had prior to the RMO experience, was beneficial. Some LLAs, though, need more significant support to implement than others. You know, the implementation of the roadworks and licensing module is very particularly challenging, particularly in terms of stakeholders like utilities, cross-boundary licenses, payments, and so on. And I suppose then there's other challenges in relation to speed limits and other future elements in relation to road safety, bridges, etc. So I would suppose it just reinforces the message from the last few slides in terms of collaboration, specialist skills, and a support structure. The shared service work commenced on that in August 2012, and with a business case being developed during 2013, with ministerial approval then, and I suppose the RMO commenced operation in the autumn of 2014. So the RMO is now established. That's the structure there that it has. There's two sponsoring organisations at the top, and the Road Management Board, the Road Management Office, Consortium, and then you can see the various units within the RMO and then the consortium of the different authorities. The staff number is actually more than 5 at this stage. That's the structure there as well. The steering groups, as we say, and then there's a number of working groups such as the Roadworks and Licensing Group, and then a Purple Book Group underneath that, which is a specific purpose and will end. Then a Pavement Management Group. And then obviously there's training, which is a critical aspect of the progress of the whole project. So I won't go into this in too much detail, just to emphasise that the RMO, I suppose, is designed to take a lead and support in the sector in terms of the development and rollout of pavement management, development of future roles for itself, development 10 guidelines and standards. I suppose evolving from the existing work underway, not putting it aside, but building on that and building on the overall collaborative approach across the local authority sector. And I suppose to develop knowledge and training and skills for the sector as a whole. From a licensing side, the overall support of local authorities for road licensing, coordinate and strengthen local authority engagement with stakeholders such as utilities, coordinate and manage payments, allow for cross-boundary applications. They're just a number of the benefits. So just in terms of implementation, the progress to date has focused on moving away from the original desktop with web-based solutions, both for the pavement management and the licensing side, and using mobile apps as well. That's the big, I think, benefit here. Putting out a range of guidelines and circulars in relation to condition rating, PSCI, which was developed by Kieran Fien up there, Dr. Kieran Fien. Guidelines of depth of overlay, and then last autumn we had a circular on the pavement management surveys in terms of getting local authorities into a standardised pavement survey regime. And we put out standardised pavement asset guidelines last February this year. They're the various elements of MapRoad at this stage. You can see the various browsers, the desktops, the financial module, the apps that exist. And it's quite wide-ranging, but it's always moving in constant development. Some of the guidelines are important in terms of supporting it. For example, on the right there, we had an update of guidelines in relation to the road schedule, which is basically consolidating a lot of old text and material in terms of how local authorities should be developing and maintaining a road schedule. It's in many ways there wasn't anything hugely new in it, just consolidating it and reminding local authorities that setup is there. The Orange Book, updating that. The Purple Book, that's the big challenge at the moment. And all are available on the department website and the LGMA extranet and on the RMO website. So just to note two other things, again, I suppose we've collaborated internationally, such as with Rodex, and just to note the different elements in place at present in terms of IPAG guidance documents. CI is probably quite notable in terms of the condition rating, and it links to treatment, index treatment to money, and is used for other applications, such as being used to assess the impact of milk transport on the road network and managing tertiary network. And it can be gathered both using manually and with Android apps, as you'll see later on. And there are the condition rating tables there. One is on the left is a rating table, and the one on the right is the treatment table. And you can see the condition is linked to rating, is to treatment, is linked to money. And just to give a sense, and you'll see more information on that, the level of data that has been gathered on it is quite significant. It's, I suppose, a testament to the use of the technologies and putting the technologies out together with the good guidance and the good manuals and having the appropriate training in place. So I think that's a good example of collaboration, I would say, and the success of it. Training is absolutely critical. in terms of supporting quality control, tracking performance and monitoring. So we've, in conjunction with the local authorities training group, is support the development of a new e-learning platform to make it easier for online learning, seminars, webinars and web meetings, so to try and promote and improve in that collaboration. And also, if you go to a training course and you want to refresh, the material is there and readily available. Performance and monitoring, just one or two things to note here. Many of these are obvious to many people, like performance indicators, audit, looking at returns and unit cost inspections. NOAC is interesting, where one of the KPIs which they're looking at and which they're asked to track now is the percentage of condition rating of the different various ratings for a local authority's network on a year-by-year basis. So that's a big thing now, which local authorities have been asked, as opposed to just being asked the length of surface dressing on a road network. So it's important for all this in terms of demonstrating to both the department, local authority management, senior management in government as a whole, as well as the elected members and the public, as to the effectiveness and how well the road network is being managed. So the priorities going forward, there are priorities in relation to the software development and in standards and guidelines here as well. So I'll pass on now to Stephen next. Thank you.
Good evening. Thanks, John. I'll just follow on it where there's some repetition. I'll try and avoid that. John's given a good background to the how the Roads Management Office was set up. So I'll just maybe just expand slightly on that and maybe give some brief overview of the office, how it's working and what its functions are. Maybe pick on a specific part of our work around the pavement condition rating system and the IPAG guidelines, Irish Pavement Assets Group guidelines, and then again some of our work to date and our future work, and then Paul will take up a discussion on the software. Regional roads, first of all, just by way of background, John's outlined that, about 13,000 kilometres. They're strategic in nature. They're connections to the national network. They're also access to the larger towns, the ports, the airports, they're urban distributor routes. So you can see there within that you have roads across the quays in Dublin. I don't know if I can use this, the quays in Dublin, Dame Street, but also roads across country in Galway to Cong, down Graiguenamanagh. Local access to Castletown Bear Port, local access to Killybegs Harbour, so that they provide a wide range of functions. They're designated by ministerial direction, and they're probably over, as John has explained, over the last number of years. I've got a fairly large and significant investment made in them, upgrading them. Local roads, and in this case we have lots and lots and lots and lots of local roads, about 80,000 kilometres of it, which is an incredible amount of roads. They're determined locally via the Declaration of Public Roads under the Roads Act 93. So they're designated by the members. They vary greatly in quality. The road outside in Clyde Road is a local road, but it can also be the road up to the hill that you might go for a walk on in the middle of a nice summer's day. They range from sort of very narrow to rural lanes. There are three principal categories: local primaries, secondaries and tertiaries. Of those, I would say it's better to describe them as a continuum rather than three distinct categories. Local primaries have significant traffic volumes. They link to their national network, maybe carry tourist traffic. A lot of the Wild Atlantic Way is on local primaries. Local secondaries are, again, maybe something similar, slightly less traffic, maybe leading off local primaries, interconnecting roads. Possibly best describe it like a sort of the capillaries in a bloodstream. And then local tertiaries, cul-de-sacs, remote mountain roads. Difficulty with these is some people may classify them slightly differently depending on the county. So the other thing, maybe just to give a bit of background, a change in environment. John has explained some of this. I see three broad streams leading into where we've arrived today. The first stream is maybe specifically to do with roads. John explained around the non-national road need study in 2004, the reductions in funding, the national broadband strategy, which brought out an impetus for improving efficiency around getting connections and road openings. The action plan for jobs, the government's action plan for jobs, which sets out a requirement for a national road management system, and the Department of Transport's investing in our transport future policy documents. But probably maybe just to explain something slightly different from the local authorities' perspective rather than a central government perspective. In 2010 we had the local government efficiency review, which set out maybe over 100 recommendations of how the sector could improve its efficiency. 2012 the CCMA, City and County Managers Association, developed a number of responses to that, one of which was a shared service plan to centralise share certain services, for example waste management licensing, but also roads management was another one of them. During the same period we have the public service agreements, the Croke Park Agreement and the Haddington Road Agreement, and I suppose the key effect of that within our sector has been sort of a significant loss of knowledge. So a lot of the staff who were working there for many years, senior staff, have left the organisation, and with them has gone quite a lot of knowledge, particularly local knowledge about how roads are prioritised and how roads are selected. 2015 the Local Government Reform Act was enacted. That's a key piece of legislation changing the direction of local authorities in a number of ways. As it relates to roads, it now enshrines the key objective from a local government point of view, that the local members at a municipal district level have powers to determine the road selected for any particular annual maintenance programme. But in parallel with that, as John mentioned earlier, the NOAC, National Oversight and Audit Committee, has been enacted, which provides for oversight and inspection and audit of local authorities about how they go about their business, how they're achieving their corporate plan. In parallel with that, as you know, there's local property tax. With local property tax has come increased discretion for many authorities. And finally, the software developments over the last maybe decade, probably the most significant part of our lives. A slide later on that. We've moved from in 2000 we had open source software starting to come on stream. 2007 we have the invention of the iPhone, this idea of mobile devices that we can move around the place, take photographs with and so forth. And then 2008 onwards we have practical applications of cloud computing. Again, I have a slide on that later on, and Paul will say probably a lot more about it. That leads us to the RMO. I suppose maybe first of all to say what the RMO isn't. It's not a roads authority. It's not, nor is it a local authority. These two statutory bodies, nor is it the Department of Transport, nor is it the NRA, nor is it some sort of non-national national roads authority or national non-national roads authority. So it's not there to direct. So each of these agencies remains unchanged, and their functions remain unchanged. And probably more importantly, is it's not a judge. It's not supposed to be determining whether they do well or do badly in this process. So what it is then is a shared service, a collaborative service. I use the illustration of an orchestra because combined together they're slightly better than they would be acting as individuals. The elements of the shared service include economies of scale around procurement and knowledge. I'll give some examples of these. Centralisation of support and data, knowledge management and sharing, and support for excellence in the sector, and then efficiency gains, which John has also mentioned earlier. And it's not particularly outsourcing, but shared within the sector, where there's elements of outsourcing where needed. So in parallel with that, just to look at some of those, economies of scale around procurement and knowledge. The office with the LGMA is developing tailored software for the sector and the Department of Transport, and more importantly, practitioners in local authority specifying procurement of mechanical surveys, directing specialist technical supports, and also developing working groups comprising the sector's subject matter experts. Centralisation of support and data, transactional payments, insurance and bond validation for road licensing now are to be centralised. So this allows utilities to be able to go in, get their insurance checked once rather than 31 times, or indeed 108 times when we originally had 108 local authorities. IT support. We can provide IT support through either ourselves directly through the LGMA or through our contractors for the equipment and the software we're using. We have cloud-based installation and analysis of data. I'll show that in a couple of slides now, some of the work we've been doing on that. As John has mentioned earlier, training and development based on feedback from stakeholders in collaboration with the LSNTG. Some examples of that are around condition rating and pavement management. Support for excellence in the sector. What works well, this Greek word, phronesis. I suppose the important thing there is that we can gather a lot of data, but we need people to who understand how the work is being done on the ground to understand how to do it correctly. Little point in just applying this in a theoretical manner. So part of that then becomes around strengthening existing and creating new networks of professionals, either as user groups, people working through this day to day, or working groups developing particular standards, for example the Purple Book, show that later. And then also to develop linkages with other stakeholders, whether it be utilities, industry, for example. So then maybe just to take one example of that, pavement surface condition rating, the PSCI index. And so the statement there, the quote from an engineer in America, without data you're just another person with an opinion. And roads are certainly like that. I think everybody can form an opinion on the road at any one time, and their opinion might change tomorrow. And around at election time you'll find plenty of opinions, or if you read the newspapers, particularly local papers. So John mentioned earlier the work Department of Transport, Kieran Feehan did, and others previously around pavement condition rating. The objectives that's setting out that, quite easy to do mechanical surveys, but very expensive. So one of the first things is to develop a visual pavement condition rating system. So the objectives around it, simple to understand and implement by a wide variety of survey personnel. No previous prior experience in pavement rating should be necessary, but some training obviously. Based only on visual pavement distresses, and the impact of all distresses and other defects should be identified in the rating. And key point as well, which John mentioned earlier, relatable to the maintenance treatment categories. So there you see the categories 1 to 10 up the right hand side. So just maybe just to dwell on those for a little while. First of all, to say that the categories then that it picks up are surface defects, pavement deformation, cracking, and surface openings. So then the various different categories down the side that are there for that. So again, relatable to treatments. You can see there routine maintenance varying down towards road reconstruction, depending on the category of treatment or category of defect that's been found. So 2 different books in broad terms. There are actually 3 books, one for concrete roads, but 2 different categories that I'm just going to dwell on today, rural and urban roads. And you can see we started rating 10, working through rating 9, where the roads are in excellent condition, only require routine maintenance, or indeed very good condition, maybe some slight defects, but really still very good condition. Rural as again, and urban, moving down through 8 and 7, and you can see start some ravelling on the surface, and maybe some stripping of the material there. Increasingly as you go down then through 6 and 5, you start to see some surface distortion, some cracking, some extensive longitudinal cracking in that one at the bottom left. You can also see the presence of utilities perhaps making themselves known there, where there's reinstatements causing maybe some localised distortion of the road or structural distress. We move down through 4, getting into the road reconstruction kind of area, where alligator cracking and rutting, pavement deformation occurring, maybe some potholes, structural distresses are starting to become present. and then moving down 3 and 2, where the roads are starting to deteriorate significantly. Patching and structural problems are fairly obvious, rotting very clear in some of the photographs there. And then right down to the rating 1, where the road is essentially gone, disintegrated. So with that in mind, the department set out RW21, a circular, in 2014, with the idea of, for the first time, carrying out a regular survey of the network. The figures there on the right-hand side, the pavement condition rating, sets out the regional road network surveyed annually, as with the local primary and the local secondary surveyed on alternative years, and the local tertiary surveyed every 5 years. To support that, a mechanical survey network every 5 years on the regional road network, with a sampling survey on other local roads. And that would really provide partially an audit, provide something to relate the visual condition rating survey to, and the various various parameters that are being recorded there, for example, IRI or SCRIM. Work to date on surveying, as of Friday, about 56,000 kilometres surveyed, so over 60% of the network. You can see this year we were to survey the local primaries, was our primary goal, along with the regional road network. As you can see there, about 73% of the local primary network surveyed, and there's a histogram there on the right just to indicate that sort of, you know, that this group over here, somewhere around 19 local authorities now have completed over 70% of their network on local primary surveys, so getting on well with it. So then maybe just to analyse what's come back in terms of data at a high level. These are the 4 categories of road that have been looked at, and that's just a summary of the overall 56,000 kilometres. So you can see there at the top, the road in pretty much perfect condition. This green box, gradually working our way down through 8s and 7s, and gradually finding our condition worsening. So to the point where at road reconstruction, these red blocks here. So that in itself is very interesting to find out, but probably nothing that probably we didn't maybe know already to some degree, that local tertiaries were worse than regional roads, or most of our regional roads are probably not in too bad a shape. So it's perhaps interesting then maybe just to break that down a little bit further. So this is just to take some of the regional roads. These are the counties that have over 70% of their network surveyed, so a reasonably large proportion of their network surveyed. And as you can see, the pattern now is slightly getting a bit more jumbled up. So you can see here at the bottom, this local authority number 1 has about 45% of its network. This is a picture of a local road, but more or less in perfect condition. So that's very good. But on the other hand, you can see there, number 4, about 45% of its network really in that poor enough condition, with cracking starting to appear on it. Now those are 2 different local authorities, but you can see there's quite a big difference between them. So we take that on another level, down to local primaries. About 19 local authorities now have their network surveyed, with over about 70% of the network complete. And again, you can see here one lucky local authority has, about 35% of their network in this very good condition. And again, if we take number 12 there, I think, we'll find that they have about 60% of their network getting into this condition. And indeed, if we look at number 15, a lot of their roads start to look like that. So just a very rough correlation. Again, local secondaries, a similar kind of a picture, with number 11 being one extreme at 40%. Nobody really with a very high proportion of roads in very good condition, or no visible defects. So just with that in mind, then we have to think about the next bit. Data by itself is probably useless. Data is only useful if you apply it. Todd Park works in Silicon Valley with computers. So IPAG pavement management guidelines. John mentioned these earlier. there's a number of elements developed by the Department of Transport, Dublin City Council and other colleague local authorities. Various chapters within it. I'm going to focus on one, but just to mention the rest. An asset register describing different categories of asset, roadways, footways, structures, traffic management systems, the traffic lights, road lining, markings, etc. Network referencing, setting out how the categories of road are broken down and so forth, how we're going to manage the inventory and data, road maintenance, categories of intervention depending on the condition of the road, condition survey and rating, which we mentioned earlier, and then perhaps one we'll focus just a little bit on is pavement asset management strategies, also reinstatements, which again we'll come back to in the Purple Book. So on the pavement asset management strategies, Section 6 of the IPAG document talks about this. So the question in the first chart up on the top sets out a kind of a nice theoretical model of how roads fail over the years as time goes on. Initially they start their life in relatively good condition, and then around the middle of their life they started to dilapidate fairly quickly, and then they reach a residual failure point. I suppose the issue with that is that the more work you can do up here to keep them in relatively good condition, the less cost there is in how to remediate them back from this condition. So you can see a model there, over time you can imagine most of your network gradually getting worse depending on your intervention. So the key question then would be, where do you intervene? Do you try and keep these roads good, or do you improve these roads that are bad? Because one costs a lot more than the other. So if we're talking about pavement management strategy, we maybe might talk about key performance indices, and we mentioned there earlier NOAC recording the amount of survey work we did, but they might also record the amount of surface dressing work we completed, or they might record the overall condition of the network. And so we might say roads requiring maintenance, we could set out the bits in red, road surface, the outputs we've had, the backlog in terms of headline, the total cost of bringing the network up to a standard, or the maintenance set against some arbitrary or thought through national level. The difficulty, of course, that would be that if we go back to those other slides, you can see that people are not starting from the same place, which is a tricky one, because you can't really say that it's not like water, perhaps, where you can say everybody should have a fixed standard. You can see that the cost of investment in different roads is going to be significantly different depending on where you are or where your starting point is. Also, the question then becomes, where do you intervene? As I said earlier on, you could intervene here, it costs one amount of money, or do you intervene up here where the roads are very bad and it costs you an awful lot more? So there becomes issues around categories of road and how those are standardised, what we're setting out in terms of priorities. Cost of maintenance, urban authorities may have to spend a lot more to maintain the roads in a similar standard to achieve a condition rating than maybe a rural authority, just because of the cost of traffic management, the cost of dealing with utilities, services are already in place. And then there's also the question of efficiency, where some local authorities may be carrying out their works in a certain manner very efficiently, versus others that maybe are not currently achieving that. So the document sets out prioritisation and how that might be carried out. Obviously the condition rating is an important part of that. The strategic importance, now how that can be set at a national level is quite difficult, but at a local level it's quite possible. The defects that are present in the particular road, the collision history of the road, the repairs and the cost. Obviously, if we're repairing it every week, repairing potholes, then that makes sense to repair a road. The claims, pothole damage to cars and so forth, the traffic volumes, the statutory undertakers' works, whether they're going to carry out works this year or next year. Maybe that prevents us doing anything with it, so we wait and try and do it with them. The role of the elected members. Clearly they have, as I said earlier, a key role in determining the programme. So the choice again is against keeping good roads good versus improving poor roads. The slides then on the bottom, just John's earlier slide mentioned it as well. this cost of steady state maintenance around keeping the roads roughly in the same condition. So other elements of our work, knowledge management and sharing, the subject matter experts, we mentioned the IPAG documents there, also how the work practice guidelines, so for example the guidelines on the depths of overlays to be used on rural roads, developed by a number of sectoral experts. A key part of our work at the moment is the guidelines for the backfilling and open and reinstatement of public roads. Sets out the reinstatement specifications, which was always there since 2002, but probably more importantly, sets out additional requirements for notifications so that are currently in use in many local authorities, but widens that nationally, and then standardise these processes. Other areas are around maybe speed limit management, bridge management, risk management, and a collaborative effort across local authority staff across the sector and with other stakeholders. Efficiency and effectiveness gains for stakeholders, and this can be all stakeholders really, in my view. There's technology enablers, which Paul will mention a bit more about, and these include mobile apps and cloud-based information. It provides an evidential basis for funding data in terms of the survey data that we've seen, and also in terms of outputs to see how local authorities are doing, how they can best manage their asset within their local authority and how they compare with other local authorities. It improves our risk management, so we know, for example, where works are being carried out, who's carrying them out, had it any effect on people, members of the public walking about, and again, standardisation and knowledge. So our work to date, the online roadworks licensing system is rolled out now for all local authorities, with the exception of the cities who already have their own system. We have it out with the telcos, and we're increasingly moving it into the utilities. We've compiled the roadworks programme for 2014, and that's ongoing. So we can see our outputs from last year in a collective and a GIS-based system. We've centralised insurance and procurement and mechanical survey data. The roadworks for 2015 is online now, with approximately 135 million worth of works across 3,000 kilometres and over 3,100 projects individually across the country. Working groups for roadworks licensing and pavement management are ongoing. For the remainder of the year, roll out the MRL system with additional functionality to the cities. For example, mobile applications allowing utilities to be able to go out, survey the works and confirm that they've completed the works, upload photographs and upload their payments and so forth. To develop with the department and local authorities a national pavement management strategy and pilot pavement management plans. So that taking some of that information that we've learned already and seeing how we can apply it. Develop drainage and footway survey manuals and software to support these. And also the software development on-site and inspection applications and project management functionality for local authorities. So we have to get from the local authorities what they really want in terms of managing their works. Just leave you one last slide. This is kind of the history lesson, or where we are and where we're going. 2002, I'm sure some of you remember a Nokia 6310, excellent phone it was at the time. The battery lasted forever. I think you played noughts and crosses on it, and maybe Tetris or something like that. I think you might have been able to send a text, and you probably were very impressed with the phone, very robust phone. And you had floppy disks, and you would go out maybe to site, and you'd probably take two because one would eventually be corrupted. And then the middle slide there is an office up in Donegal, the planning files for a year up in Donegal at the time. So it's you can get a sense that that's how we worked, and we filled up these, and if you had to look for stuff, you would go and pull them out and maybe root around, and maybe you couldn't find the file because somebody had taken it, and so on and so forth. So from 2000 onwards, we now have mobile devices, smartphones, iPads, etc., and they have GPS tracking. So that's fundamentally changed how we do our business. You can go now, you decide, will I drive into town tonight? Is it busy? The phone will tell you all this stuff. You can take a photograph here this evening This lecture's been broadcast to other people around the country. It's a completely different world from that point of view. The other application from 2008 onwards, this idea of cloud computing. So it's no longer necessary to have these miles of folders or clipboards maybe to go out and do a survey. You can upload it from a tablet and it's available when you get back to the office. So that fundamental change. So Paul, maybe I think in the next slide will take us through some of the practical applications of that. Thanks.
Okay, just to round it off from the technology perspective, I suppose the history of the challenge for the LGCSB as it was, the LGMA as it now is developing and putting out a system which is going to be of use to the local authorities, and our function is primarily or solely in some respects to deliver applications or assistance in ICT, be it procurement advice or the development of business systems to the sector, so specifically to the local government sector. So asset management, most of our organisation would deal perhaps in other types of systems like financial systems, planning systems, procurement of ICT, and then obviously the likes of hosting and advice on that. Within the engineering section, it would have been on the likes of water and environment over recent years, and in particular in the last few years with the fact that the Department of Transport have been the main sponsor for the development and implementation of a pavement management system, if you like. So traditionally in the past there would have been plenty of GIS systems and spreadsheets and access databases floating around local authorities, so the main challenge really is to just get it into one central one-stop shop for access of data and delivery of reports to assist in decision making. So to be able to come up with some form of a system which will gather data and present it to the local authority engineer and technicians and management in a useful format. And trying to deliver that, of course, there are the challenges. So the funding model that's available in terms of for local authorities to be able to deliver these kinds of systems, and then the constraints of budgets and what we can and cannot do. Obviously on local authorities there's significant pressures, be it social or political pressures, and then there's also the other engineering factors and how we build those in. So again, there's usually disparate systems around the local authorities with all of this information in it, but not necessarily having it accessible to one person at the time. The history of it, I suppose, if you go back to the late 1990s, we would have developed a number of GIS systems in the area of water and environment and planning, and roads was just another one of the engineering functions. But it was more an asset register than any kind of an asset management system. It was used for recording pieces of information, but not necessarily assisting with any decision-making processes. So the MapRoad GIS, as I said, was back from the late 90s, developed on top of a GIS, so there were licensing costs there. MapInfo was the GIS desktop of choice across the country at the time. It would have been used in various business systems in use in the local authority. So simply the idea to be able to just put the network onto an IT format, and there was taking it off paper and taking it off spreadsheets and recording it in one central location. And at the time we thought it was probably magnificent, but the reality is you still ended up having copies of data all over the place, different people's machines on servers. Some people's machines weren't great, so they copied stuff locally onto PCs and onto disks and moved it around. So what you ended up, it wasn't unrealistic to have 7 or 8 different versions of a road schedule, for example. So the question lies in which is the master. But the road network names, lengths, widths, whether it was taken in charge or not, very little in the way of information on events or condition of rating of roads or anything like that. It was purely just, this is the infrastructure. On top of that, then obviously these spreadsheets for which engineers and technicians, CAD drawings, GIS data sets, various different sources of information which would have been available. The financial system and worksheets, again, no linkages back to the asset or to any asset management plans that would have been there. Mechanical data has obviously been around for quite a while. There was 2004, there was a significant 10%, I think, survey of data brought in and was imported into the system. But again, it was in the system as raw data and not necessarily as any tool which could be used for decision making. Traffic data, again, would have been incorporated, but the biggest challenge for any of these systems was keeping the data up to date in terms of traffic data may be put in, but it had to be manually put in. So somebody would sit there typing in traffic counts, and then the system itself would use the expansion factors to deliver out AADT values for you. But very manual effort. Similarly with the collision statistics, we would get delivery of from the RSA or the NRA before it on the minor, serious and fatality collisions, right going back to the mid-90s. However, the material damage accidents, which could be of the order of nationally probably 27,000, would have to be manually entered in by the local authority if they wanted to make any use of it in terms of cluster analysis within the GIS system. So all that's beginning to change now and over the last few years. So while there was a system at least in place which was doing its best to keep up with advances in technology, it didn't necessarily give you all of the information that you needed readily to hand. As Stephen and John had said before, a lot of that information was available within the local authority, engineers and technicians and overseers, but not necessarily available to everybody. So there was expert knowledge there, but it wasn't in a one-stop shop place for accessing and sharing. So Stephen and John have said already what has been developed. So the ability to be able to record and input your history of works going back over however many number of years into a system, and then the vital part from probably 2012 onwards is trying to keep that data up to date. So on an annual basis, what would normally happen is people would update their drawings and get them fit for purpose for sending into the department as part of returns, and then at the end of the year try and perhaps, if the resources and time allowed, to put that back down on paper as the ad constructed drawings. Difficult to manage in terms of resources, whereas now it should be as simple as being able to put the information in when it comes to hand, and there it is, it's done. We don't have to return to it later on in the year to start putting in our planned works and playing catch up. So drawing up the programme of works, reviewing all of this information on the map, on the GIS map, and I'll show you the system now in a second, and then be able to filter out information. So going off and doing a condition rating on a system, but then being able to filter it out. Perhaps you're only interested in the local primary, for example, so to be able to declutter the screen and look at just the statistics you're interested in. One of the other apps, I suppose the first app was the condition rating one, which has been made reference to already, which the output results Stephen was showing has come from that. There was also the speed limit, so in line with the speed limits review and the requirement on local authorities to look at different signage for the urban for the rural delimiter, to be able to go out, collect those using a tablet app, simple enough, record it once in the field, and it's in the office as soon as you get back there. Indeed, it's in the office before you get back to the office. Analysing history, so the idea is on the left there we have the history of works. You probably can't read the labels on it, but it'll say, 2013 it was a road reconstruction, what kind of surface material or base course material was used, and then the picture on the right is the actual condition rating. So on the left, the red ones are your kind of structural interventions, which Stephen referenced earlier, and then on the right is the PFCI, so the 1 to 10, the reds being your 1 to 4, up to the greens, which are your 9 and 10 ratings. So that's the same picture. Okay. And then being able to review the annual programme. So once all this information is put in, it's put in once. The programme is there with the accumulation of works that is going to happen in any given year. So that's a sample there just of the breakdown of expenditure length areas, if you like, against the different intervention categories of structural overlay, resealing and surface restoration. Okay. Speed limits I've already mentioned. So the idea here is this part here is the actual browser system. So the PMS system, which is available within the local authority to all of its users, and then on the right here is the actual app itself on an Android tablet itself. Okay, so you go out to a signpost, for example, to a speed limit sign, enter some data in against it, what the speed limit is, whether it's a repeater sign, a few pieces of information like that, save it immediately. Also take a picture while you're at it, and that goes up to the system and again gets stored in again. So it gives a better file management system in terms of, rather than taking a phone out or taking your digital camera from a few years ago, taking a picture, bringing it back to the office, having to copy it onto it, and then normally it would just reside on a file server back in the office, which you would know is there, but not necessarily anybody else in the office would know that you can link it back to the actual GIS and the road network. So the technology to rate the road, I think it was 2012, I suppose the significant amount of work was done on this, and there was various different iterations of how we would go about doing it, but there seemed to be a main focus on it's a network level survey. We require, how do we go out, rate the road in a simple manner and have that information available. initially there was looking at, you want to make it something which is cost effective. And even in the last 3 or 4 years, the typical 10-inch Android tablet, I think when we did this first, it was for example, the Samsung Smart 2 was about 500 or 600 euro, 500 euro perhaps if you get it on a wireless only, so no data pack with it. And if you're buying a data pack, probably around the 600 euro mark. Whereas now you go out and buy the same device, you'll get it for 300 on wireless, and then maybe another up to 100 on the data pack, depending on what data pack you go for. So 250, it's 250 to 300. You're nearly halving the price as we go. Now the challenges for us are obviously technology. It's very difficult. I mean, how long is a system fit for purpose, an IT system? It could be as little as 2 or 3 years. In the few years since we've launched the 2011, 2012, since we've launched the PMS system, the browser system, we've probably gone through 3 or 4 versions of Internet Explorer alone. And every time something else changes on the desktop, last year there was a big challenge in XP, for example. Microsoft XP is no longer supported, which meant that most local authorities have endeavoured to upgrade to Windows 7. And indeed, of course, Windows 8 and various other operating system changes require having to reinvest in that software. And it's an exercise we're doing at the moment, is just taking some time out to upgrade the current browser system. Now, it comes with its advantages. We're not tied by licensing. Because we're moving away from the desktop, we don't have those MapInfo GIS desktop licenses, which could be 1,500 euro a year, typically, or 1,500 euro to purchase, and then maybe 300 or 400 euro to pay a maintenance contract just to get the upgrades. So there are significant technology challenges just in trying to keeping up to date. Okay. The Flexible Roads Manual has been has been mentioned already, and that was probably the starting point for us. So we made a few decisions on how we would do it from a technology basis. We were looking at developing something for a tablet. So this is really only going back 3 years ago at this point, and even then we weren't sold on doing the tablet. Is it reliable? Is it durable? Can we get the data out as we need it to? Can we have two-way communication between the tablet and the main system, and then back down to the tablet when we need it? To use a laptop would have provided some kind of a ruggedized device, but you have the GPS. You're going to have to buy extra equipment to plug in the GPS tools to it. So it just really was, the decision was, it was just too messy to try and go down that road at the time. We looked at the App Store and iTunes and what was available for the tablet and smartphone markets. There were things that came close, but not quite there, not quite going to give us what we needed. So in the end, we embarked on a development with our own software system integrators and came up with a solution to develop an app which allowed the local authority individual to go out, one person driving, one person rating, drive the network. You have the road schedule on the device, so everything gets tagged immediately. And that was one of the other constraints. We didn't want to have to go down the road of post-processing data. If you have to post-process data, it requires a significant resource, and in a local authority environment may very well not get done because there are too many other things to be done back in the office. So as you rate it, it's recorded, it's uploaded, it's there, available for you when you go back to the office. Okay, so once that development was done, we went back to the Flexible Roads Manual, which had been produced, and piloted the use to see could the two coalesce together, and that's where the results have come out. Typically 50 to 150 kilometres a day, depending on the nature of where you are. For example, the first pilots we did was in Galway, so in Connemara, so many rural roads, a lot of local tertiaries where you got to drive up and it's a cul-de-sac and come back out again. Significant area to cover, so we were probably down around the lower reaches of the 50 kilometres an hour. Typically go out and survey for a day, session in the morning, session in the afternoon, and come back. So over the course of probably 5 weeks with, I think there was 4 different teams or 4 different pairs doing the ratings, most of the network in Galway County would have been done over that period of 5 or 6 weeks by 4 different teams, so significant. That's just a picture of the tablet itself. On the top, this is a screen grab if you like. Simple touchpad, 1 to 10, drive along. Not the guidance from the Flexible Roads Manual is to not rate anything for less than around 200 metres, so not to be trigger happy and changing it every time you see a defect on the road. It is meant to be a network level survey. So click the buttons as you go and drive along, and then produce the results back in the system. I think I have a quick look at the system itself. This is just a test site on a particular area in Tipperary. So that's the kind of data that was gathered over the course of a couple of years in Tipperary. The ratings, as you've seen, is your 1 to 10 down here. You have a year filter down here, so if you want to look at particular years here and just look at what happened in 2015, there's probably not a huge amount of data there. You can also filter it back down on individual roads. So if you're only interested in looking at, for example, the local primary network, just looking at the ratings for the primary network will give you that there. So just to reduce the clutter on the screen. And then on top of that, you could overlay your works programs. So for example, I'll just turn off the ratings for a second. This would be your works history over that particular year. So we're into 2015 here. So we're looking at the planned works effectively, or what would be going into this year's programs. And the legend, similar to before, the red stuff is your road reconstruction, tying the colouring back to the actual rating system itself, and the blues just the resealing or surface dressing, as it would have been more commonly known previously. Okay, the basis of the system, it's a private system to the local authority. This is not a public system, so it would reside in our own environment. So we have a hosting environment which we use along with Revenue, which would be the main purveyors of it. One system, one database. Even when we started this, it was installed in the local authorities on their own servers. Now we have one central system, one database, one code base. The apps themselves, once data is recorded, each individual local authority would have an access code, so anything recorded gets routed to the correct location through web services and would appear immediately. So one of the more recent apps we're doing is the completed works, so the works app, which will allow the engineer to go out on site and record where they intend to do the work. Start recording, drive to where they figure the work will be completed, if you like, the end point of that, and rate the road as you go on a 1 to 10 basis. Press save and upload it directly to the system, so it's available within the browser system back in the office from there on in. Okay. The mapping that's been used is the OSI mapping, which is available from Phoenix Park as a web service, and that's proven to be a real winner for using the system. There shouldn't be anything from the local authority IT staff to be looking after in terms of keeping the system up to date in the background mapping. So the mapping is there, it's self-contained, and no overheads in terms of support, and the license fees are already paid under the City and County Managers Association licensing agreement with the OSI. Mechanical data can also be brought in as well. So for example, there was a regional road survey in 2011, and we would have obtained the results from the contract surveyor and imported that into the system. So a mechanism has been put in place now to import and standardise the collection of all mechanical machine-based data in the future and upload it directly into the system. Okay, just pop back to here. Okay. The output Stephen has already shown you. Once it's got into the actual system, it is straightforward enough to get it back out. So we have a switchboard here, if you like, at the start. You can go on to reports and then pull out your entire road schedule if you need be, or the PSCI report, which is the stuff Stephen would have shown in his presentation. And similarly, all work. So history of all works in tabular format, so it's easy to pull out the expenditure and different types of work that has gone on in the current year or the next year. Okay. So there we have the recorded works. You can also go out. One thing that was missing, I suppose, from records in local authorities would have been that the planned works would have been kept up to date because there was a requirement to put in for an application for funding to the Department of Transport. But at the end of the year, those records didn't necessarily get updated to the as constructed. And for example, we went out to one local authority last year to pilot the updating of works that have already been recorded using the app to see can we download what was planned, fix it, and upload it back to the system. And in the first 5 works that we did, the actual as constructed varied from what was planned. So there was a big gap there in terms of actually understanding and have knowledge of what was done on the ground as opposed to the intention of what was being done. The roadworks licensing system works on the same principle. At the moment it's been rolled out without the GIS part, which is just a license application procedure, so a local authority, a utility for example, can apply for a license to dig a hole. There's a mechanism in place that's all centrally hosted, one system for the entire country used by all local authorities and all of the utility contractors. Incorporate the T-license methodology. From here, the next stage would be to get the GIS incorporated into it, and then after that is to develop the mobile app so that the inspector can go out and take photographs and upload any relevant information to see if the works are as they should be. and notifications back to the utility company for that as well. Other things we're looking at important traffic data, as I was saying, similar to what we're doing for the mechanical data. Collision data, the RSA are now getting the material damage collision instance from the pulse system in electronic format, and that's for the first time in 2014. So we'll be passing them on to local authorities when the RSA have signed off on it, so there'll be no more data entry for collision data. It'll all come through a web service. On-site investigations, links to financial systems, so the grant system, which has been used this year for the first time, local authorities make their application through the pavement management system for their restoration, maintenance and improvement funding, and all of the data is there, so there's no more having to go back to the Excel spreadsheets to populate them manually with the program. You enter it once on the GIS. Indeed, it could be entered for the first instance through the tablet app, uploaded and then passed on to the department. Speed limits, footways and drainage is something we're going to be looking at over the course of the rest of this year, and a bridge register. There's a lot of bridge data around the country after the surveys for the regional bridge survey, which over recent years. That data isn't yet gathered together. Different local authorities have it in different formats, so we're endeavouring to get that data in. I think about 4 or 5 of them we've already imported into. Okay, so the challenges really are to develop systems which will be of use and won't just sit there, which is probably something we're guilty of in recent years, developing a system which you can put a stupendous amount of data into, but the reality is nobody has the time or resource to sit in front of it and enter the data, and likewise to actually pull that data back out. Okay, so we'll continue to look at developing tools in conjunction with our own project office and the RMO to deliver solutions, if you like, that are fit for purpose, and our systems where decisions can be made a little bit easier. Okay?
Thank you, John, for John, Paul, and Stephen for those very comprehensive presentations. If the audience has any questions to put to the speakers, could you just raise your hand and note your name and the organisation that you're attached to? Don't be shy. You do.
Thanks. Kieran Feehan, PMS, congratulations first of all to all of the speakers, excellent set of presentations. Paul, a couple of questions for you. It looked like you were doing the Tipperary stuff live, were you, I suppose? And secondly, in terms of it's still called MapRoad, is your database, or is your GIS still operating with MapRoad, or are you using something different? And lastly then, say from an area engineer's point of view, if all of this stuff is up in the cloud, how's the download and upload and communications and so on? Is that working out okay, or what's the...
Yeah, the Tipperary one, this is actually, it's all contained within a virtual private network for the local authority, so there's no public access. This is actually just a test site up here, but it's data we copy over every now and then, so it's just a matter of copying a database to actually get access to the data. So the local authorities themselves will only have access to the system once they are within their own network domain. Okay. Now, in time, we will develop portals to get this kind of information out. Speed limits, for example, which may be of interest publicly, we will just pull that data out as web services. There won't be any copying of data around, if you like, just to get that information out to whoever needs it, whatever stakeholders there may be. In terms of the desktop, the MapRoad desktop, which is the building block, the road schedule, is still in existence. But the hope is over the next 12 months to phase that out completely, so there will be no more GIS desktop, so everything will be accessible through one portal, if you like, and no other way of doing it. In terms of delivery speed for local authorities, network communications between the LGMA hosting environment and each individual local authority is quite good now. The only place you may end up in, depending on the area office, if there was still a few area offices, believe it or not, which were still not far away from the 256k links back to County Hall, so they can only access it back through their own services there. So some of those would indeed be slow, but by and large I haven't come across any local authority who cannot access the system through their own area offices, no matter how remote they actually may be.
Sorry, is the GIC inventory, is it complete? Or the master inventory, is it complete?
If you just say your name, organisation, so
Hello, Owen O'Reilly. I'm chartered engineer. Just asking the question: is the national TIC inventory complete?
Which is the TIC?
To taking in charge the inventory?
No, I think it's fair to say it's not. What would happen is there'll be a lot of local authorities which would have had very up-to-date. I'd say the push on the road schedule in GIS probably started around the late 90s, and then when there was significant resources in the local authorities through the next decade, there would have been a big push on getting the road schedule up to date. I think what you'll find is with the building programme and investment that would have gone on 10 years ago, there's a significant amount of networks of the road network yet in the system, and even those bits which are, you would find a lot of what we would class as unregistered roads still in the system, so they're not necessarily taken in charge. So we differentiate within our system between what is taken in charge and the public road system in itself. So you would see network that it's there which is not within the full control yet of the local authority. Would that be fair to say, Stephen? There would be a significant...
As Paul says, there's a significant amount of network or the housing estates that haven't been taken in charge yet. So they may appear on the mapping, but they're not part of the schedule as such as they stand today. And that's really a matter to be determined by each council and each set of elected members as to whether they take roles in charge. But the network, the other thing we probably found is some, you see there's some of them, we probably found that a certain number of technical errors from time to time, just for created on the desktop, and we're working with local authorities to upgrade those and sort of update them this year. And probably the final point is there's a number of roads that were built over the last number of years by local authorities and redesignated. So that some of those aren't quite on.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, is there any correlation then between, you know, some of the counties where they've performed very well in terms of their pavement and, you know, the input from the different local authorities? Like, your role as such, are you offering guidance to the local authorities in terms of where you see inferior, say, pavement types?
From our perspective in the LGMA, no, it's purely within the systems and the implementing of the systems, but the role of the RMO, I suppose, in the coming years will be to give guidance on where, performance of the network is going to be key to what the RMO are going to do and coming up with plans.
It's really about what in terms of solutions, I think it'll be about what works locally with the national.
Stephen, sorry, could I ask you just go to the podium there so we could just secure on the mic? Thanks.
Within the in terms of solutions, I think that there's a number of guidelines being developed. I don't think there is a one-size-fits-all kind of solution. It would be nice if there was, but I don't think that's really realistic. So I think it'll be a question of developing solutions with the sector over time. I said there are a number of guidelines that showed up the guidelines for rehabilitation of local and regional roads and rural settings. But then again, I say the solution that would work outside here won't work in Connemara, and nor would it be appropriate to sort of apply it.
Just a question there on Kieran Daly with DSB. Just a question on, first of all, the work programme that you create and that it's uploaded on GIS. I'm just curious to know if there's any stakeholder involvement in the work programme, such as with the NRDO, if they're planning works the following year and you plan some work that might be taken up the following year, and also is there any communication with utility companies like Airvia and Irish Water? Yep. And the second question then was just on the GIS software you have there. Is there any let's say, facility to upload ancillary equipment such as public lighting that might need that from a public safety point of view, and also public lighting and pedestrian crossings and stuff like public safety side of things?
In terms of the first question, the idea that how the program is developed, how it's worked up to now is each local authority develops maybe a 3 or a 4 year works programme department dictate that through circulars. So we have a long-term plan and strategy in terms of what our plan is for the next number of years. Now, heretofore that's been developed locally through local knowledge. As you can see, the system now provides a rating and an evidence-based model to do that. As regards, the prioritisation, I said that's selected by the local engineer and how they determine their priorities. I would suspect over time those guidelines that were set out will help inform that. The local members determine the sequence and the prioritisation as their function now under law. In terms of liaison with utilities, without a doubt that we've always worked with utilities as local authorities. So, for example, a water main might be going up a particular road, and we'll be working would have been our colleagues in the water service up to now with Irish Water now to say, well, is that main likely to go in next year? If so, we might wait a year rather than building a new road and then finding ourselves having to dig it up the following year. That wouldn't make any sense. But obviously we have to balance that against a road that may be just getting into worse and worse condition, and that the public expects something to be done with it. The second question as to the type of assets that can be recorded on, absolutely we can record any type of asset or fixture on the thing. The question is developing that over time. For example, Paul mentioned bridges, accident locations. There's no reason why speed limits, there's no reason why other particular attributes of the road network can't be recorded. It's a question of agreeing that what we want to record and the prioritisation we want to put to that.
Yeah, on the public lighting, we've had quite a few requests from local authorities. Would we include public lighting in this? Now, there's already a system in place which is used by a good number of local authorities for recording the fixture itself and for the maintenance, which is used by their own contractors for surveying public lighting. So it is certainly something that could be built. It may be more likely that we will take those data sets in from the third party on some kind of an end user agreement and display them in the systems. And similarly speaking, where roadworks licensing applications are being recorded in the MapRoad licensing system, that could be made available as a web service to other systems who need to use it. So rather than rebuilding the tools within our own system or expecting others to build them, that they would just provide it as a web service.
Just to emphasise that point's very important, this idea that there are other data sets out there. And it makes sense where people want those to be brought into the system, that we would come with some data sharing agreement with them where we can record that asset and record it once rather than having two people go out to watch the same thing twice or to measure the same thing twice.
Do we have any more questions from the audience?
Helen Hughes from the NRA. Thanks for the presentations, very enjoyable. I don't know much about pavement management systems, but is it normal to have subsurface information like the geological conditions on pavement management systems? And the second thing is just on relation to another data set that might be of interest to you is the Gardaí are doing traffic counts at all their speed camera locations on regional roads, I think.
Okay.
Thanks.
Do you want to start with the subservice stuff?
Just in the first question, it's intended to bring in additional layers. There's a lot of data out there in terms of web services such as geological data, soil data, flooding maps. They're all there. We would intend to try and layer those as background layers to provide additional support for local authorities managing the road network. I think it's just to help inform the decision making. That can be quite easily done, and in fact it's something we intend to do. Another one, for example, is zoning, planning zoning. I think that would be very helpful as well. In terms of the traffic data, I'm aware of what you're saying. We would be looking to kind of bring that data in, or whatever data we can get to put up in the system. So the idea is really that we can try and use the system to kind of build up data and pull in data wherever we can, and that it's constantly building up information and learning, and that we can then try to find tools in terms of use and interpret and analyse that data.
I'm John Daly, Fingal County Council. I'm the last question, I'm told. You mentioned taking in data from other bodies, but isn't it time to open up this data to other people? GSI, very generous with their data. Flooding people aren't generous with their data. We have the My Plan, you mentioned the development plan that the DO have publicly available. Why not reverse the flow of information from this?
Well, from a technology perspective, it wouldn't be an issue. Obviously, I mean, we've designed the system so that it is readily and available to be put out to a web service in terms of the decision.
My question was addressed at the finger who's going to press the button.
Well, there wouldn't have to be a finger, I suppose. The point is, once an agreement is in place that we would provide, our system would provide the data, then it's just a matter of somebody making that decision. And then there's a small bit of development done, and it will always be live.
Maybe just to say, I think that there's certainly a model there for that. You can see, for example, in Scotland, their Scottish Roadworks Commissioner make available all roadworks to the general public, and they can go in and see what roadworks are happening today and what's happening tomorrow, and indeed what's planned for the next couple of months. I think that would certainly be something that an objective we're trying to get a public website and a portal that we can share data with certain people. The questions around that is whose data is it, and what are we recording, and what are we permitted to share. So you get into that space of governance around data on some of the information, not all, but some of it. And who's, as I say, have we been permitted to get it? Are we permitted to pass it on? Probably not, without an agreement of the original data owner.
Just add one last comment to that. There are legal obligations coming at us in terms of sharing data as well, coming from Europe. So it's not as if we will have to choose. In fact, we will have to share data. And to be honest with you, it's kind of pointless to gather data and not use it. And obviously trying to use it as effectively as possible, both internally, but make it as well available to others where appropriate and where possible. So we're trying to get the maximum benefit from that data.
I'd like to thank the speakers again on behalf of the Civil Division and the Road and Transport Society. I'm just going to pass you on to Cormac Bradley, who's going to propose a vote of thanks. And just before I pass over to Cormac, I'd like to remind the audience that the main event for this evening, the Civil AGM, is about to commence in a couple of minutes, so you're very much welcome to stay on and attend. Your participation would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, when we see such a huge volume of statistics presented to us, certainly in the public domain, and I appreciate the sensitivities you've just talked about this being to a certain extent in a private domain in its current format, the accusation often is made that there are lies, and then there's damn statistics. But I think by virtue of the presentation that you've given here this evening, I think that you have shown that the proper collation of certificates and the proper dilution and using different sources of statistics have allowed you to put together a very comprehensive assessment of the road status that you've regaled us with for the last certainly hour and a bit. And it's interesting that in actual fact what comes across is that in sharp contrast to the lies and stamped statistics is that you've shown the value of the data that you've got, and that in fact the data is so valuable that it presents its own challenges. For example, you've referred to the fact that you have to determine whether you keep the good roads good or whether you're expanding and bringing the poor roads back up to the standard that you want them to be at. I think that you certainly have elaborated on how the collation of data has changed over the years. You've shown paper files, you've talked about the Nokia, the pioneers of the Nokia phone and how much easier it has become. But I think it's also very significant that you said that at the end of the day, no matter what the quality of collection of data is, there's still a requirement for that hands-on experience in order to execute the plan that the data is telling you. I think the only sorry aspect of this evening's presentation, and I mean it in the most generous sense to the speakers, is that there aren't more, if you'll pardon the expression, bottoms on seats in this lecture theatre, because I thought it was a very comprehensive lecture. It actually put together the three parts of sort of project planning, project collation of data and how that data can be used. So in that regard, I would ask the audience to please, in the traditional sense, to commend you for the quality of the presentation you've just given. Thank you very much indeed, gentlemen.